Ocala's information station, 1370 WOCA.
Ocala.
All right, 25 minutes before 11 o'clock. It's August 20th, 2014. The date is important because this is a show we want you to call in live, and if it's not August 20th where you are, then just listen to the rebroadcast. But right now we are inviting you to call John Fuller. This show is called Legally Yours, and John is an attorney here in Ocala at the law firm of Fuller & Fuller, the other Fuller being his beautiful wife, Janet. And John is here to do one simple thing, answer your questions about the law. The number is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, 622-9622. We haven't seen John for 3 weeks because he took the last 2 weeks off with his family to get a little rest and relaxation. How you doing, John?
I'm good. It's good to be back. It was good to take a trip and relax, but we're back full speed, and it's a delight to be here. And appreciate all our listeners. And if you have a legal question that we can talk about in general terms, we welcome your calls. Certainly, if it's an area that you, your family, or friend or loved one who's been in a car wreck, has business commercial controversies, Social Security disability claim or potential claim, those are the type cases that we handle in our office. Our telephone number is 352-547-4292. And would encourage you to call if you care to have your case reviewed in detail. We can speak about general legal principles on the air. And it's always fun. We have some wonderful listeners, and hopefully someone will give us a call today. But it's good to be back, Larry. Hope you've done well.
Yeah, I have. I know you don't like to bring in the big news things, but I just have a question about the word indictment. Because Texas Governor Rick Perry was indicted, and then he turned himself in, and then I guess he went out and got ice cream. So what is an indictment exactly?
Well, an indictment is a formal criminal charge that can only be brought by a grand jury. There are two types of juries. There's a petit jury, P-E-T-I-T, which is the jury that you see trying cases with testimony and cross-examination and that sort of thing. The grand jury meets in secret. It's made up of citizens who are impaneled, and the prosecuting attorney presents what evidence he wants to present to the grand jury. Theoretically, the grand jury can ask for other evidence, but there's an old cliche that a prosecutor could get a grand jury to indict a ham sandwich if he wanted to, because he controls it. Grand juries used to be more active in our criminal justice system, but now the prosecutor can charge by direct information without having to go seek an indictment. But the grand jury listens to the evidence. Sometimes the person they're investigating never appears before the grand jury. If a person they're investigating does appear before the grand jury, he's not entitled to have counsel represent him to make objections or that sort of thing. It's a very, very unusual procedure. And the grand jury, after hearing the evidence, then decides whether or not to bring formal charges. If they do, it's called a true bill of indictment. If they determine that there's no criminal activity that has occurred, then they return a no true bill, and the person is not charged. You see grand juries used a lot where there are significant political components or political overlay, where a prosecuting attorney, whether state or federal, doesn't want to bear the burden of making that decision for whatever reason. He or she can pass the buck to the grand jury, and then the grand jury will indict. It's a formal charge. You then go to court, and the indictment is presented. It's called presentment, and you are formally charged at what is called an arraignment. You formally enter your plea of not guilty, unless you're going to plead guilty to it, which doesn't ever happen. And the case is then the case starts.
Okay.
And you go forward with discovery, getting witnesses, taking depositions as allowed by the rules, that sort of thing. And then you have a trial. And they have to prove each of the elements in the indictment, which is the charging writ, sometimes called the accusatorial writ.
Okay.
They have to prove each of those elements beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. There's the presumption of innocence and all these protections that we've talked about so frequently on this program. And it's just a different way of charging. An offense.
Okay.
And so the governor of Texas, and I took basically a news fast over the last few weeks.
I don't blame you.
I didn't read a paper or listen to news. I've read that's good for you to do that. So I pretty much took a news fast. But in any event, he has been charged by a grand jury, and grand juries are a product of the citizens from where they're drawn. And I did read in the paper this morning that the grand jury was in Austin, Texas, which is known to be exceedingly liberal. It has the University of Texas there. It's the capital of the state of Texas. It has the legislature and the governor's office there, and it is largely Democratic. Whereas all the rest of Texas is extremely conservative, largely Republican, and this is a Republican governor. And so they brought the case before a grand jury in Austin. If you had brought the case before a grand jury in Houston, you may have gotten a different result.
Really?
But
so
again,
they must have known that.
But they don't have unlimited discretion as to where they can do it. But the governor obviously is in Austin because it's the capital, and the act took place there.
Right,
so that would be it.
Right. The phone line is open, by the way, while John is taking a breath here. If you want to call in and ask a question, please interrupt us, change the topic. We want to be able to serve your needs. The phone number is the WOCA Climate Control Source Hotline, 352-622-9622, and you'll be able to speak to John live. It was that story that you hear words all the time that are used in the news, like indictment, for example, and you sort of kind of feel like you know what it means, but just your explanation tells me I didn't know anything about it.
Right. It's just a charging instrument.
Wow.
It's the piece of paper that says the state of Texas, through its grand jury, indicts, charges John Doe with the following offenses, and then they lay out that on such and such a date in such and such a county, he did this, that, or the other in violation of statute number so and so.
But it would be mostly a political violation and not necessarily a guy who robbed a bank. He wouldn't.
Well, you could do that, but they don't normally do it in crimes like in alleged crimes like that, because number one, it's time consuming, it's expensive. They have to bring in all these citizens to hear it, and
so who pays?
The taxpayers. It's tax paid, just like the judicial system. It's paid for with your tax dollar. But they in any given time they will file 100, 200, 300 criminal cases, both misdemeanor and felony. I don't know what the census of charges are right now, but 99% of them, they get the evidence that has been gathered by law enforcement. They review the arrest, which, remember, an arrest can be made upon probable cause, which is a much lower burden to bring the charge than it is to get a conviction, which must be proven beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt. Probable cause is a much less difficult burden to get the case started. So they can file an information, which is a charging document, works just like the indictment once it's filed. it charges the suspect with a criminal offense, and then you go forward with the trial.
So somebody with a charge against them obviously has a different, you serve, an attorney serves a different purpose than somebody who's going through a divorce or challenging the Social Security system. All those things are different than somebody with a charge, whether it's an indictment or another kind of charge.
Criminal cases are very much different than any other case, because it's the only case where you can lose your liberty. Theoretically, if it's a capital case, you can lose your life. And so criminal cases, the criminal justice system has a different set of rules of procedure, the rules of criminal procedure as opposed to the rules of civil procedure in a civil case if it was an automobile case, or the rules of family procedure if it's a divorce case. The Florida Supreme Court has adopted procedural rules that instruct judges and lawyers on how these cases are to be handled, and there are a variety of rules for different areas and bodies of the law.
So when somebody has the cynical reply to something, he had the best jury money could buy, implying that a rich defendant is going to do better than a poor defendant. Who, in a poor defendant's case, let's say he loses his case. Now he's in the paper you'll read he's going to file an appeal. Well, this guy has no money. How does he do that?
They appoint the public defender.
So there's no truth to the money thing?
Well, of course, if people have resources to prepare their defense, they're going to be better prepared to confront the evidence and to attack the evidence and to show any deficiencies in that evidence and to establish, all they have to have is reasonable doubt. Okay, you don't have to prove yourself innocent.
Right.
If you just show that the evidence against you, that there's a reasonable doubt that it doesn't rise to the greater weight, beyond and to the exclusion of every reasonable doubt, then you're entitled to an acquittal. It certainly, the system, if someone is wealthy, do they have a better chance of getting acquitted? Absolutely, yes. The system is not perfect, okay. but they have the tools and the resources to hire experts, to hire people who can scientifically analyze the evidence and determine whether or not the people working for the government of the state of Florida, whether it's federal or state, whether they made mistakes. The state has an almost unlimited budget, and it has the Florida Department of Law Enforcement Crime Lab, the FBI, the DEA, the Marion County Sheriff, the Police Department, Game and Fish Commission. They got all these law enforcement arms. They all have some level of experts on their staff to do forensic testing, to check blood, to do all sorts of things that are not beyond challenge. You can have two experts and have two separate opinions. Now, if you have the ability to go hire someone who graduated Phi Beta Kappa, who's written the articles, who's a faculty member of one of the finest universities in the country, who has all the blue chip qualifications, and they come in and say, the corresponding expert for the state failed to do the test according to generally accepted scientific principles, and therefore the result is not valid. And you look at the expert that the state has, and they went to Slippery Rock, no offense to any particular college, but they went to a less prestigious school. They graduated in the bottom 10% of their class, and they had to take their board certification exam 3 times before they passed it. Well, all this comes out before a jury, and then the jury can accept or reject the opinion of whatever expert they want. So yes, now to go back to your concept, the best jury money can buy. That's a complete fallacy and an unfair comment, because all jurors are picked from people who have a pool of people who have Florida driver's license. If you get a driver's license to operate a motor vehicle in the state of Florida, then you are subject to being called to serve on a jury. And then you go before the court, and the defendant doesn't get to pick his jury. He depending upon the nature of the charge,
right.
He usually has 3 peremptory challenges, which means I don't have to have a reason. I just have a bad gut feeling about that person that they don't have the ability in this particular case to have a clean slate, to be free from bias. Classic example, if it's a criminal case and the citizen has been charged with the offense of robbery, and a person is sitting on the jury and they've been the victim of their convenience store being robbed 3 times in the last 16 or 18 months, they're probably going to have a little bit of a predisposed disposition to not be totally free from any bias. And what people want on both sides of the equation is a fair jury, because only fair juries can dispense justice. And that's what the system is based on.
You're listening to a live show if you're listening on August 20th, 2014. And if you'd like to call John and you're listening to the live show, you are invited to call. The number is 352-622-WOCA. If you have a question about the law, whether it's the criminal part of the law or maybe something with your family law or Social Security issues, you are invited to call in. We all learn whenever you bring a subject to John's attention and we hear John's answer.
And I want to say again, we've talked about it, but I think it bears repeating fairly frequently, that ignorance of the law is no excuse, and you're charged with protecting yourself. And if, for instance, you are in an automobile accident, you have 14 days to seek medical care of a qualified medical doctor of osteopathic medicine, a physician's assistant, or an advanced registered nurse practitioner. And if you don't do that, you will lose certain valuable insurance rights that you paid for under your personal injury protection. You need to seek out a lawyer, and if you don't have a lawyer and you would care to call our office if you've been in an automobile accident, we'd be glad to talk with you. If we don't make a recovery, you don't owe any fee for that type of case. But many people aren't aware of that, and it's very important. And we've talked about it. We talked about it when the law was being pushed through the legislature by the governor at the 11th hour 2 years ago. And I think that people, ought to know that they have the right to consult with their lawyer if they've been in a car wreck, and they ought to do it and do it in a timely manner.
Yeah, it's one of those messages. If you understand that, share it with everybody you know, because in the event of an accident, they don't want to be waiting that 14 days or more. Yeah.
Right. It's very important.
So when we hear about like people wanting to sue our legislators for their decisions, does that not even ring?
They're immune. I mean, they have immunity. So you can't, that's a legislative function. You can't sue the prosecutor for charging you with a crime because he has immunity. The system wouldn't work without that. So now the governor, they've got some other statute up there that he threatened, allegedly, to veto something if it wasn't done the way he wanted it done.
Right.
And I don't know anything about Texas law,
right.
but
even locally, the NAACP, it sounds like they want to take the city council to court. I don't know if that's the same thing as suing, because they so far haven't changed the saggy pants law.
That was high on my list of my of my news fast. I read absolutely nothing about that. That's the bottom line.
I just didn't know what
I don't know. I haven't.
if they're able to do that.
Yeah, no, I haven't gotten to.
I can't imagine that
to
trial.
looking that into it, and yeah, that would be.
The interesting thing about that, what seems like a little story, is that it made big news.
Anytime you have competing constitutional rights, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, those types of things against the protection of the public health, welfare, and safety. And I'm not sure how that segues into the pant scenario, but one of the classic statements made by Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes that we have the right of freedom of expression and freedom of speech, but that stops when someone tries to shout fire in a crowded theater.
Right.
Because even though it's freedom of speech and you want to stand up and shout fire when there isn't fire, and everybody makes a mass exodus to the exit, and 3 people get trampled or severely injured or killed or what have you because someone thought it would be fun to stand up and say that, and then they say, hey, I have the freedom of speech, I can say what I want to. Well, those are balancing acts. That one seems pretty simple to balance, but others are not so easy.
Yeah. So, as far as we enter into the fall now, do you have seasons like in the retail world? There are certain seasons where you're busier than other seasons.
I've never been able to really draw any conclusion about one particular time being busier or more particular types of cases. I think people who are going through family law issues, they usually don't want to deal with that during the Christmas holidays. Sometimes there are acute things if someone doesn't return the child for visitation or time sharing during the holidays on a timely manner or something, but usually there's a slowdown in that during the holidays. But I've never been able to see any kind of pattern that we're in the fall, that means we're going to try a bunch of criminal cases, or we're in the spring, we're going to have a bunch of personal injury cases. The cases are there. They're in the system. You can have a case pending, but if you've been in an automobile accident and you file your case, but while the case is pending, you have complications and you have to go back in and have second and third surgeries. Right. You're not going to want to go to court until you've reached maximum medical improvement, so you can show to the jury what are the extent of your damages. I represented a young man who was hit from behind by a car driven by a drunk driver going 80 miles an hour, and he had a horrible compound fracture of his mid-femur shaft. And they did the surgery, and the surgery took, I don't know how many hours. It was extremely extensive surgery to flip the section of the femur back over where it had flipped up. Wow. Flip it back over and put a wire around it and bolts and rods, all this. And then the bone didn't join to start with. So they had to go in and do other surgeries to try to stimulate healing. Wow. So we could not finalize that case until we got to the point where we knew that his medical condition had stabilized.
John, we are just about out of time. We got about a minute. Do you want to give your number again?
Sure. We'd be happy to talk with you about any of your legal issues. Our number at the Fuller & Fuller Law Firm is 352-547-4292. Our toll-free number is 855-534-2565.
And be sure to call us here at WOCA if you need any of John's information repeated, or if you just go to WOCA.com, you'll see his name on the guest list with his information as well. John, good to see you again. Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, Larry.
All right, we'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source. Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News Radio, I'm Karen McHugh. ISIS says they beheaded American journalist James Foley in retaliation for U.S. airstrikes in Iraq. They say they'll kill another if it doesn't.